I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching my ex-wife soak in the praise. Lisa, you're incredible. Raising Tyler all on your own while he became valedictorian? She smiled modestly, like she hadn't spent years rewriting history. To everyone here, I was the absent father, the man who chose work over his own son, and Lisa made sure that narrative stuck. What they didn't know was that I had been there, at every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference I could make between ER shifts. I didn't fight back with words when she spread her lies. I waited. Now at Tyler's graduation, it was time. I walked up to my son, handed him a leather-bound album, and simply said, "I wanted you to have this before college." As he opened it, the truth stared back at him. 10 years of memories she tried to erase. What would you do if your ex told the world you were never there for your child? Would you stay silent or let the truth speak for itself when it mattered most? Stay with us and hit subscribe to support the channel. Your encouragement drives us to share more powerful and meaningful stories like this one. Being an emergency room physician was never just a job. It was a commitment, a promise that when the call came, I would be there. No matter the hour, no matter the sacrifice. But no one tells you how hard it is to balance saving lives with being present for the ones that matter most, your family. When Tyler was born, I swore I wouldn't be like those fathers who missed every milestone. I knew my schedule would be brutal. Overnight shifts, weekends, holidays. But I made a vow to show up when it counted. And for years I did. I was there for his first T-ball game, even though I'd worked a double shift and hadn't slept in 30 hours. I cheered at his school play, still wearing scrubs because I'd rushed straight from the hospital. I made it to parent-teacher conferences, birthday parties, and those little moments in between, the ones you don't realize are important until they're memories. But Lisa, she saw things differently. To her, every missed dinner or late arrival was proof that I cared more about strangers than my own family. She'd roll her eyes when I apologized for being called in. "It's always the hospital first, isn't it?" she'd say, half joking. But the resentment was real. At first, I thought we could work through it. 14 years of marriage teaches you to weather storms. But somewhere along the way, Lisa stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as the villain in her story. When we finally separated, I hoped we could stay civil for Tyler's sake. I was wrong. Lisa didn't just want a divorce. She wanted to destroy the image of me as a father. She told friends I had barely been around for Tyler. She hinted to teachers that I was more of a paycheck than a parent. Worst of all, she whispered to our son that I'd always chosen work over family. At first, I didn't believe Tyler would ever buy into it. We had too many good memories, didn't we? But then came the missed calls, the short replies, the canceled weekends. I could feel him slipping away, one poisoned word at a time. People started looking at me differently, like I was some deadbeat dad who'd abandoned his responsibilities. I wanted to defend myself, to shout the truth. But how do you fight a story that's already been told? I realized something important then. Arguing would only make me look guilty, so I stayed quiet. But I didn't forget. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every game I attended, every recital, every moment I stood in the crowd, cheering for a son who was being told I wasn't there. I wasn't going to let Lisa's version of the past become Tyler's reality. I just needed the right moment to show him the truth. And that moment was coming. It started with little things. Tyler stopped calling me Dad and switched to Andrew, like we were distant relatives instead of father and son. Our conversations, once filled with stories about his classes and baseball games, turned into one-word answers. "How was practice?" "Fine." "Want to catch a movie this weekend?" "Busy." At first, I chalked it up to teenage mood swings, but deep down, I knew better. Lisa's words were working. One afternoon during one of our rare visits, Tyler finally said what I feared most. "You don't have to pretend, Andrew. I know you were never really around." The words hit harder than any blow I'd ever taken. I kept my voice steady, even as my heart broke. "Who told you that?" He shrugged, looking away. "Mom doesn't have to tell me. I remember. You were always at the hospital. You missed everything." I wanted to argue, to remind him of the nights I sat in the bleachers, exhausted but present, to tell him about the mornings I left work early just to see him perform in the school choir. But I saw it in his eyes. He didn't believe that version of me anymore. Lisa had rewritten the story, and Tyler was living in her narrative. I realized then that defending myself with words would only push him further away. Anything I said would sound like excuses, so I let it go, on the surface. But behind the scenes, I became meticulous. I dug through old drawers for ticket stubs, scrolled through thousands of photos, tagging every date and event. I even requested records from schools, proof of parent-teacher meetings I had attended. The more I collected, the clearer the pattern became. Yes, I'd missed a few events. There was no denying that. Emergencies didn't wait for anyone. But I had been there far more than Lisa ever gave me credit for. And what shocked me most was discovering how often she had been absent. There were games where Tyler looked into the crowd and only saw me. Not because Lisa was busy working, but because she was out shopping or having brunch with friends. There were recitals where I held the camera, recording every note, while Lisa sent sorry, running late texts that never ended with her showing up. Yet somehow I was the villain. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about Tyler growing up believing a lie. But timing was everything. If I showed him this too soon, he'd think I was attacking his mother. If I waited too long, the damage might be permanent. Then came the invitation. Tyler's high school graduation. Lisa made a grand show of it, calling every relative, organizing a family dinner, and posting online about how proud she was to have raised such a successful young man on her own. That was her favorite line. I did it all alone. Friends flooded her comments with praise. You're a super mom. Wait, Tyler is lucky to have you. Not once did my name appear. That's when I knew. The graduation wasn't just a celebration for Tyler. It was Lisa's stage. Her final act in a play where I'd been cast as the absent father. But I had a different ending in mind. I spent nights perfecting the album. Chronological order, clear dates, side notes explaining every context. Each page wasn't just a memory, it was a counter to every false story Lisa had told. By the time graduation day arrived, I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready, not for revenge in the traditional sense, but for truth. Because sometimes the best way to respond to lies is to let the evidence speak louder than words. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't come from arguments or betrayals. It comes from looking into your child's eyes and realizing they no longer see you the way they used to. A week before Tyler's graduation, we met for lunch, a rare occasion these days. I tried to keep things light, asking about his plans for college, his friends, anything to bridge the growing distance between us. But halfway through, he put down his fork and said, "Look, Andrew, I think we should talk." That name again. Andrew, not Dad. I nodded, bracing myself. "All right, what's on your mind?" He hesitated, like he didn't want to hurt me, but felt obligated to be honest. "I've been thinking, after graduation, maybe we should take a break. You know, some space before I head to college." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "A break?" I asked quietly. He avoided my gaze. "It's just, we don't really have much of a relationship anymore. I don't remember you being around when I was younger, and I don't want things to be forced." There it was. All of Lisa's efforts to erase me had worked. I wasn't just losing time with my son, I was losing who I was to him. I swallowed hard, forcing back every emotion threatening to spill out. "I understand," I said, though every part of me wanted to scream that he was wrong. But I knew this wasn't Tyler's fault. He wasn't being cruel. He was simply reflecting the story he'd been fed for years. After that lunch, I sat in my car for over an hour, staring at the steering wheel. This was the lowest point. The moment I realized there was no going back to how things were. I could either accept the role Lisa had assigned me in Tyler's life, or I could find a way to show him the truth without destroying what little connection we had left. I thought about confronting Lisa, demanding she stop poisoning our son against me. But what would that achieve? Another shouting match? More bitterness for Tyler to witness? No, words hadn't saved me before, and they wouldn't now. That night, I pulled out the nearly finished album. Page by page, I reviewed every detail, every ticket stub carefully placed, every photo captioned with dates and memories. I added one final section, a comparison chart. Not to shame Lisa, but to offer clarity. 83%. That's how many of Tyler's events I had attended over the years. 62%. That was Lisa's number. Seeing it in black and white even shocked me. I had never counted before. I just showed up whenever I could. But numbers didn't lie. This wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. I realized then that this album wasn't just for Tyler. It was for me, to remind myself that despite the narrative spun around me, I had been there. Graduation day wasn't just a milestone for Tyler. It was my only chance to reclaim my place as his father before he stepped into adulthood, carrying a false version of our past. I closed the album, took a deep breath, and made a promise to myself. No more silence. No more letting someone else define who I was in my son's eyes. The point of no return had come, and I was ready to face it head on. I wasn't interested in public humiliation. This wasn't about revenge in front of a crowd, or proving Lisa wrong for the sake of my pride. It was about Tyler, about giving him the truth he deserved before stepping into a world where half-truths and manipulation could define relationships forever. So I planned carefully. The album had to be more than a collection of memories. It needed to tell a story, a silent, undeniable story that no argument could twist. First, I organized everything chronologically, starting with Tyler's first Little League game. There I was, standing behind home plate, still in my scrubs, holding a glove that hadn't seen much action since college. Next came school plays, science fairs, choir concerts, each event marked not just by photos, but by programs, tickets, and even notes from his teachers thanking me for attending. But I knew photos alone wouldn't be enough. Lisa had spun her version of events so well that Tyler might dismiss the pictures as isolated moments. So, I added context. For every event I missed, I included a short explanation. ER emergencies, critical surgeries, life or death situations that had kept me away. I didn't hide my absences, I owned them. And then came the subtle contrast. I included moments where Lisa was absent too, not to attack her, but to show the reality Tyler never saw. A photo of me at his championship game, Lisa's seat empty because she was at a spa weekend. A recital where I stood alone in the back row, recording his solo performance because Lisa was caught up in a meeting. By the time I reached the final pages, I knew the message would be clear. This wasn't about who was better. It was about who was truly there when it mattered. Once the album was complete, I had it professionally bound. Leather cover, high-quality pages, something that felt permanent. This wasn't a folder of loose papers. It was a legacy. Now came the hardest part, the delivery. I didn't want a dramatic scene. I didn't want to call out Lisa in front of everyone. I just needed Tyler to open that album, surrounded by the very people who had been fed Lisa's story for years. Graduation day arrived, and as expected, Lisa was in full performance mode. Her family crowded around her, offering congratulations as if she alone had raised Tyler to this moment. I stayed in the background, watching, waiting for the right time. After the ceremony, amidst the sea of caps and gowns, I approached Tyler. He looked surprised to see me, not because I was there, but because he probably assumed I'd keep my distance like always. I smiled and handed him the album. "I wanted you to have this before you leave for college," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. Lisa noticed immediately. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the leather-bound book in Tyler's hands. "What's that?" she asked, suspicion lacing her tone. "Just something for Tyler," I replied, never breaking eye contact with my son. Tyler flipped open the cover, curiosity taking over. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. As he turned the pages, I watched his expression shift, from confusion to realization to something I hadn't seen in years: recognition. He was seeing me, not the version Lisa had painted, but the father who had been standing quietly on the sidelines all along. Lisa tried to interject, making small comments like, "Oh, he's just trying to make himself look good," or "Don't let that book fool you." But Tyler wasn't listening. For once, the truth was louder than her voice. I stepped back, letting the moment unfold naturally. This wasn't about forcing a reaction. It was about planting a seed that would grow when Tyler was ready. By the time the family dinner rolled around that evening, Tyler hadn't let go of the album. Lisa avoided eye contact with me, her confident facade beginning to crack. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The plan had been simple. Show, don't tell. And now the execution was complete. All that remained was to let the truth settle and wait for Tyler to decide what came next. The family dinner was exactly what I expected. Lisa's victory lap. Her parents, siblings, cousins, they were all there, raising glasses to toast. The woman who sacrificed everything for her son. I sat quietly at the end of the table, a guest at my own son's celebration. Tyler hadn't said much since I handed him the album. He kept it by his side, occasionally flipping through the pages while everyone else carried on with their rehearsed praises of Lisa. Then came the moment Lisa had been waiting for. She stood up, glass in hand, smiling like she'd just won an award. "I just want to say how proud I am of Tyler," she began, her voice dripping with practiced humility. "Raising him on my own wasn't easy, but seeing him graduate today makes every sacrifice worth it." There it was, the final nail in the coffin of the story she had spent years crafting. People clapped, some even wiped away fake tears. But Tyler didn't clap. Instead, he cleared his throat and stood up, holding the album in his hands. "Actually," he said, his voice steady but loud enough to cut through the applause, "I think there's something everyone should see." The room fell silent. Lisa's smile faltered. "Tyler, this isn't the time." But Tyler ignored her. He opened the album to a random page and held it up. This, this is my dad at my 10th birthday party, the one I thought he missed." He flipped to another page. "And here he is at my middle school championship game." Page after page, Tyler revealed moments he had forgotten, or rather, moments he had been told never happened. I watched as faces around the table shifted from admiration to confusion, then to quiet embarrassment. Lisa tried to regain control. "Tyler, honey, you don't understand. Your father—" But Tyler cut her off, his voice sharper now. "No, Mom, I'm starting to understand a lot." He turned to me, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Clarity. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath. "Because I didn't want to turn your childhood into a battlefield. I figured one day you'd see things for yourself." The weight of those words settled over the room. Lisa sank back into her chair, her power slipping away with every page Tyler turned. No one spoke. What could they say? The evidence was right there, undoing years of carefully spun lies. After dinner, as people awkwardly said their goodbyes, Tyler pulled me aside. "I've got a lot to think about," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "But I want to spend some time with you this summer, before college." "Sure," I nodded, keeping my emotions in check. "I'd like that." As we walked out, I caught one last glimpse of Lisa, sitting alone at the table, staring at the album like it was a grenade that had just gone off in her hands. The fallout wasn't explosive. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic exits. But sometimes, silence is more deafening than any argument. In the days that followed, the calls and texts from Lisa's family stopped. The people who once judged me without question now had doubts they couldn't ignore. Tyler stayed true to his word. He came over the next weekend, and for the first time in years, we sat together. Not as strangers forced by obligation, but as father and son rebuilding something real. The damage Lisa had done wouldn't disappear overnight. I knew that. But the truth was out. And once spoken, or in this case, shown, it couldn't be buried again. That summer was quiet. No grand gestures. No forced conversations. Just simple moments. Grilling in the backyard, watching old baseball games on TV, and rediscovering what it meant to simply be there. Tyler didn't ask many questions about the past, and I didn't push him to. I knew trust wasn't rebuilt through explanations. It was earned through consistency. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Tyler finally spoke up. "You know," he said, "I used to think you chose work over me." I stayed silent, letting him finish. "But looking at that album, I realized you were choosing both. You just never made a show of it." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I wasn't perfect, Tyler. I missed things I wish I hadn't. But I always tried to be there when it mattered. He gave a small smile, the kind that told me we were finally on the right path. When he left for college a month later, he took the album with him, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that stories can be twisted and that sometimes the truth isn't loud, it's patient. Looking back, I don't regret staying silent all those years. I regret that it took so long for the truth to surface, but I'm proud of how it did. I learned something important through all of this. You don't always have to fight lies with louder words. Sometimes the most powerful response is to let your actions and the proof of who you really are speak for you when the time is right. Because in the end, the truth has a way of finding its voice, and when it does, it's undeniable.